Hi, I'm making this video because the iron is hot and it's time to strike. You might hear some dogs barking in the background. My phone's going off. All sorts of things are happening. My cats might break in here and who knows what else. But as the case happens to be, I wanted to talk about Sia's Music. A movie that many in the autistic community are having a difficult time with because of what it represents to us, to people like us, and to families who are still struggling to navigate what autism is. I am 38 years old now and discovered in 2018 that I am on the spectrum. When I say discovered, my parents hid it from me growing up, and this movie speaks to me specifically because I am music. I dance in my head. I make all sorts of funny little dance gestures. I listen to a lot of music, and I experience echolalia, which you'll need to go look up if you don't know what it is, by listening to the same song over and over instead of, as some cases I've seen, the same instance of songs, maybe 3 seconds, 5 seconds on repeat. I'm a little bit nervous about sharing this stuff with you because, if nothing else, I imagine that people might not care. But I care, so I'm going to say it anyway. I got the shit kicked out of me by my parents growing up. The types of things that Zoo and her boyfriend do in the movie are things that I experienced, but much worse. And because there's a pandemic going on, I had to find other hobbies to help deal with the trauma that I was experiencing from losing 4 people during the event. And I decided to start writing my memoir. There's a story that I recently finished writing about how, as a child, I hurried too quickly eating my dinner after getting, I don't know, something like chicken fried steak with gravy and mashed potatoes and some green beans on the side. Except this particular instance, the green beans weren't agreeing with me. They were very bitter. And I decided to wolf them down because my mom always insisted that I clean my plate. She was a woman who would stab me with her fork, jab me with her knife if I was putting my elbows on the table. I knew the king's manners, how to dress beds, set up tablecloths, adjust lamps just right for guests in the most properly and orderly fashion. I didn't know much about being a kid, but by the time I was 8, I could redress an entire house because she insisted that was knowledge I needed to know and that my sister needed to know it too. So we were well behaved. And in this particular instance, I ate the green beans without chewing them and put my plate away, ran up the short stairs to my room, and coughed on the way as I hit the 3rd step, and projectile vomited my last 2 mouthfuls of green beans onto the carpet. And we had moved into the house a few years before, but the carpet was just always impeccably clean. It was just one of those things that my mom had to have. She just wanted clean carpets. And as an autistic kid that likes stimming, that was actually one of my favorite things. I love the feeling of carpet. I've got a bunch of shag carpet in here, and I love taking my socks off and just doing the John McClane, you know. But to be fair, in normal circumstances, other people would have chewed their food. To me, it was just a matter of getting it down as fast as possible so that I could go play with my toys. I was a little kid. So she discovered this after hearing me, and my sister came over and was like, you know, she's 2 years older than me, and was like, ooh, you know, that's so gross. Why would you do that? You know, and she has spectrum tendencies too, so it's like a response like that from her. It was no skin off my back. But my mom saw it as a slight against her because I was autistic. She had been telling me for a long time to chew my food, to eat my plate, to follow her rules. Whether or not she has spectrum tendencies or not, jury's still out. And in a moment, I will tell you another story about what she grew up with. But she made me eat the vomit to teach me a lesson about chewing my food. She sat there and told me I needed to take the green bean pieces and put them back in my mouth as an autistic person who was already struggling with how rancidly acidic they tasted. And told me that I had to eat them. Now, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when you finish a big meal, you got to go take a big old shit. And as demure as my mother is, nature called. So she left me there with a pile of puked up green beans for me to finish because she had to go hit the head. And it was the first time that I ever lied to her because I scooped up the remaining ones and went and threw them in the trash can in the guest bathroom and hid them way down deep underneath so that if she took a cursory glance over it, she couldn't see them. Well, that was par for the course for my childhood. You know, she wanted me to socialize, so she would push me out the door at 8 a.m. and tell me not to come back by lunchtime. I was the little fucking asshole in the neighborhood who would show up at 8:30 during the summer, ringing fucking doorbells of friends, trying to get them up so they could play with me. And in my head, I just told myself that they were busy. You know, the reason I would ring the doorbell 15 times was because the first 14 times they hadn't heard me. And I found myself with less and less and less friends as the parents clued in that I had something wrong with whatever it was back at my house. But they just did not have the bandwidth to help me figure it out. So they'd either ignore me or submit and let me in, let me go play with their kids. Well, my uncle, one of the people who I knew who died during COVID, he told me some pretty dark stories about what my mom saw when she was younger. And one of the things that he told me about my grandfather, who died when my mother was 7, was that when my uncle was 7, when he was her age at the time that this instance happened, the reason my mom did the things she did, like holding me down, like punishing me with certain punishments that she deemed acceptable. You know, if I smarted off to her, I had to hold a bar of soap in my mouth for 5 minutes. That kind of sensation to an autistic person is too much. You know, my sister and I got thrown in cold showers with our clothes on, left there for 2 hours at a time. Those kinds of things, besides, you know, the stereotypical getting slapped in the face for mouthing off, getting swatted for, you know, being in the way, you know, getting spanked for doing something wrong, you know, all those regular corporal punishments also saw extreme psychological breaks that the halo effect around the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life up to that point made me forgive her, made me think that she was smarter than everybody else I knew, so she must know what she's doing. Benefit of the doubt. If you don't know what the halo effect is, go look it up. And if you've got really hot parents, maybe reconsider how much you've forgiven them for things. But my mom described that, as I grew up, that my grandfather was this prince, just a magnificent, magnanimous man. And when I reconnected with my uncle in my late 20s, he and I would stay up late and get wasted. And, you know, he was an alcoholic at the time and he eventually kicked it. But he told me this story about how when he was 7, he used to defecate in his pants, as many autistic kids have. There's no sensation of an urge. There's just an uncomfortable tightness. And then you fart, and it's not a fart. And if anybody who's watching this knows what I'm talking about, you know the struggle is real. You know that there are times when you're like, no, I don't need to pee. I don't need to pee. I don't need to pee. And then you're in a 4-hour car ride and you're like, okay, I got to go now. The last stop was 17 miles ago. Oh God, what have I done to myself? Well, you know, shit's tough. Shit's tough all around. And if you have to deal with stuff like that, then in the case like what we're dealing with here, you know, You make people get out of your way. But when you're a little kid like my uncle was, his dad would come back from training or doing topographical work for the military, and he would just bear down on this boy. And my uncle would get really nervous about interacting with his dad, even though he had 5 sisters, ranging from 2 or 3 years younger than him all the way up to almost 10 years older than him. And there was one time that he pooped his pants at the dinner table in front of all 5 of his sisters, his mom and his dad, after his dad had just got home from deployment. And my grandpa beckoned him over to the head of the table, told him to unbuckle his pants, pulled his pants down, told him to step out of the dirty underwear, took the dirty underwear and put it over his head, and made him sit down and finish the rest of the meal. And after he was done eating, he told him to go get cleaned up and looked him in the eye and said, "You're never going to do that again, are you?" So my uncle tells me this. And a chain of events start happening, because at the time I was actually fighting to get over borderline personality disorder. I am one of the only people in the history of mankind who has done it. And I did it by going to war with myself and seeking answers at the ends of the earth about people, about religions, about history, about anthropology, about sociology, about economics, about everything that I could possibly get my hands on to understand what it was that I was dealing with all of the invalidation and negligence that I saw from both of my parents. And the reason I am telling you this is because I would like you to change your mind about music. You see, Sia did what my parents did. Zoo did what my parents did. They took hearsay, rumor, easy to access information from people who seemed like they knew what they were doing. How do you think Zoo and her boyfriend would react in that movie if there was a sequel to finding out that what they were doing to music was torture? What would that look like? Because that's what the movie is about to me. It's about parents who don't understand what autism is. So they ask around and they find out that, yeah, there's restraining. Yeah, there are colorful ways for autistic people to step out of their condition. Now, you've seen my eye movements. You've seen how messy my life is because I'm recording while my cat is yowling. Dogs are barking. I don't look perfect. Clouds are coming and going. And I don't have the software to trim this up and make it look pretty, and I don't also care. This is a shoot from the hip kind of thing, and that's going to be okay for now. I'm speaking slowly because I learned to. I'm speaking steadily because I learned to. My mask is what you see here. I still play with toys. That's the way I stem. I got Transformers up the fucking yin-yang up in here. By the way, anybody who collects, this guy's fucking incredible. But what music is, and the reason why it should be a 9 out of 10 instead of a 3 out of 10 on IMDb, is that we can change how we perceive it if we want to. Is it directed really well? Sure. Is it written really well? Sure. Does it have glaring issues with the Autism Speaks style bullshit that we have to fucking deal with all the fucking time? I'm saying let that be the point. Let it be the Lolita of the autistic world. A movie so problematic that it absolutely encapsulates the problem in itself in a meta sense. If Zoo wanted to do a good job, she should have used the fucking internet. Why do people use so many instances within movies where they could escape the killer or the abusive ex or the bad job or whatever it is by simply doing a Google search. And if you're not into Google, go on Monster, find that better job. Go on LinkedIn, make the better connections. There's always these magical moments within movies that show that we can rise up. But what I've noticed after consuming tens of thousands of movies, because that's when I do some of my best thinking, is that there is a serious problem in Hollywood and in the rest of the film industry of autistic worship. You see it a lot in anime. The guy who doesn't fit in with everybody else because he thinks he's, whatever different, or the girl who's, the childlike sprite, the fairy-esque character who then climbs into the mecha battlesuit and destroys everyone. It's definitely not Asuka. It's definitely not Shinji. But Rey is autistic as fuck. And she is the best of them. Now, Shinji's depressed as fuck, and that show is about depression. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it's Evangelion. But you see these instances in movies where they show autistic people rising to the challenge because we are resilient as fuck. Even though we are hard on ourselves because the Dunning-Kruger effect takes hold, the fact that we rise up again and again and again, and somehow it is one of the hardest things to beat us, becomes the secret love affair that Hollywood has with characters like us. We have the greatest length to go. And when we finally get there, they say, hey, we're glad you're here. But they never say, holy fucking shit, your trip here was intensely harder than ours. Let's make sure that you've got the seat at the table. Let's make sure that it's well padded. Let's make sure that we acquiesce to your needs because you are still struggling. I've done another metamorphosis of myself throughout the pandemic, and I've decided that the character that I'm going to be next is the King of Hell. Now, what does that mean? My life is pain. Whether it's noises, lights, all sorts of things. But I've got the ball in the air already. I got the shit kicked out of me as a kid so that I would learn how to socialize. And my parents didn't ever seem to step in when I had 12 bullies passing me around like a fucking beach ball when I was in elementary school. The truth is, I've thought about finding them and hurting them. And I found them. But that's not who I am. I want to see people do good for themselves. I want to see things get better. I want the world to live on hope and have people's faith rewarded. At the end of the movie, music gets up on stage and actually sings. Now, I have been a ballerina. I can crush it at some karaoke. I've been a steel worker, a cowboy, an auto mechanic, a chef. I've been a babysitter. I've been a house cleaner, and just about anything else you can fucking imagine. I've done a lot of things as I've tried to figure out who the fuck I am. At the end of the movie, if Sia wanted to pay extra special attention to what it means to be autistic, Zoo would have done the fucking singing, and music would have sat there and listened to her and had it play out in her mind as some musical landscape. And we saw something like that as she and her boyfriend danced together, and we would see that manifest as it does, as that point of being autistic is. To some of us, life is a movie. Life is otherworldly, dreamy, and sometimes incredibly nightmarish. The reason I am saying it is worthwhile to re-look at the movie from the perspective of somebody who did it wrong, because that is the stigma that we fight, is because at the end of it, if music did sing, then that means that it was the torturous intrusion of other people's social agendas that got her to change. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the tragic love affair of uneducated people on the lives of autistic people being showcased as that. To me, it's not this disability porn, this sort of triumph of the human soul to be normal. Instead, I look at it as a tragedy. The characters don't really know who this autistic person is. The director doesn't know. The writer doesn't know. Even the actress herself, who plays the role of this person, is unsure about the identity of this girl. But Maddie Ziegler is going to feel the effects, like I do, of the people who pushed me out of the way. Told me that what I was doing wasn't good enough. That I needed to stop being so intensely focused on myself or whatever it was I was into at the time. And that I needed to focus on how I was impacting them. In my book, Maddie's all right. She did a good job. Because there was a time in my life when I was that girl. And I love dancing. And I love singing. And I do it in the shower, and I do it in the kitchen, and I do it all over my fucking house. And it's part of the reason why my wife married me. I'm not going to give it up. But I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for her. Not necessarily. I mean, if it wasn't for other people. I told myself that I was going to get really fucking good at singing. So I went to the Mexican cowboy karaoke bar that we had across the street from our apartment in San Francisco pretty much every Wednesday for about 4 or 5 years. Try to sneak my way in there, and among people doing, I'd be singing some Elvis and crooning, and then finally when my wife would show up, I'd sing it to her. I'd sing for her. It's a good moment to build. And that's the strange thing is, how do we build moments for autistic people who don't seem to respond? How do we build moments for people who are non-functioning? I mean, there was a girl that I was working with here who had a son who was about 11, and I told her that I'd babysit for him. And the thing was that this kid's jumping all over the couch, jumping all over the tables, throwing markers all over the place. And not a problem for me. I know what he's doing. I'll look him straight in the eyes, even if he's not looking me in the eyes. Talk to him. Tell him what I need. Be direct. Be uncompromising. But learn how they listen. And we got along great. I had to yell at him one time because he was messing with some little pipe I had, a little plastic bit that I had to use to lock the windows in that he discovered. I told him to put it down and whatnot. And I wound up yelling at him because he jammed his finger down the thing and got it stuck. And I wound up having to take his finger painfully and gently apply it and pull it back out. But to him, to a kid whose sensations are on fire, who's afraid because he's lanced his finger into a tube that he doesn't know how to get out of because it's done the Chinese finger trap friction trick. What am I supposed to do? I can't get a buzzsaw out for this kid. I can't do that kind of stuff. And we're seeing that in movies like Music, where you take a kid like that and you pin him down and you hold them in place so that they can't hurt themselves or other people. But the reality of it is that only when they're in a position of true danger or true discomfort is that allowed. Pulling this kid's finger back out of this tube meant keeping his finger from losing circulation, breaking because he was shaking it, doing any kind of thing like that that might really injure him. That's the only time that it's okay to put your hands on a kid like that. But the thing is that you constantly have to weigh choosing which devil you serve. Do you make that kid as comfortable as possible? Because ultimately, if that's the case, everyone you do that for is going to wind up in a padded room. It's the only way to deal with it. There's going to be discomforts in life, and you wind up learning how to navigate them together. So seeing Zoo accumulate knowledge about music is an important thing. Seeing Sia's reaction to the accumulation of knowledge that what she did wasn't right, that it was 3 years of research on the internet, and that she still didn't discover wrong planet. I mean, come on. It took me 15 seconds to Google what's the #1 autism forum on the internet. It's like 15 seconds. I mean, come on. And to then Google, autism stigmas. Again, how long does Google take to whip up a couple of results? And I came across the I Am Autism thing, which I had seen back in the day. I remember that commercial because I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up where they decided to play that because I am from where my mom doing torturous things like what she did to me that she learned from her father was okay. That's what the church told her to do. That's what her other acquaintances told her was okay. So when they would see that kind of thing, they just turn a blind eye to my screaming. Sia's movie is a great first run at trying to show how bad autistic people have it. But after everything that she's been through, I want the redemption arc to see her make another one about someone like me. Show the truth about what you all do to us. Show the truth about what hell we live in, what we overcome. Show the truth about who we become after you change us and force yourselves upon us. I have had a lot of adventures, hence the nickname the King of Hell. Because if I'm always going to be in pain, if I'm always going to be in hell for the rest of my life, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to make it a story worth telling. That'll be my revenge. That'll be the way that I get back at all the people who tortured me along the way. To all the people who couldn't be bothered with a 15-second Google search to find out more about my condition, but swear they are allies. I'm filled with disappointment by this because as I was beating borderline, Sia's music was a great catalyst to rise. I don't know all the words to the song The Greatest, but I do know that I've listened to it more than 10,000 times. It reminds me of who I am in the plan of who I want to be. And I don't want to gloat about that. I'm just going based off of experience. I have a lot of scars covering my hands. I've got a lot of experiences that I've lived through. And I've got a lot of people who I have taken my empathy and my skills to refine and develop myself and have helped with my knowledge and wisdom. So I can understand that what she was trying to do was help people. What she was trying to do was spread hope. But like somebody who has an autistic person thrust into their life, whether they were born to them or whether they were adopted or whether they were discovered, there is more that needs to be done. There is a harder path that must be walked together. That is the forge of destiny. That is how we rise. Together. No matter how hard it is. And we'll learn to love and laugh and hug and cry together. But if I could spend the rest of my life never knowing that there's another autistic person out there who had to go through what I had to go through, that would be my heaven. And until that day comes, I'll remain the king of hell.